What are some mysteries that have actually been solved? Bermuda Triangle turns out to have the expected number of mishaps at sea given the amount of shipping that traverses it. And nothing mysterious in that region since use of GPS became common. I would wager that satellite tracking of storms was also really helpful. There are a lot of hurricanes out there, and if you don't know how to avoid them, it might mess up your day. This was the one explanation of the disappearances that made complete sense of the years. Severe thunderstorms in that part of the world pop up randomly and frequently due to the natural weather in the area. Thus a ship will be fine 1 minute and blown off course and sunk by severe weather next. With the increase in information sharing and more accurate weather forecasts, ships are able to navigate the storms better. Same for the planes. Randomly having to navigate around major storms or having been caught in severe downdrafts due to the clouds either burn too much fuel or cause a severe loss in altitude. Both are bad for a plane. I distinctly remember reading about the Bermuda Triangle when I was about 7 or 8 and discovering diagrams of water pulling planes out of the sky Mona style. I remember thinking it was something I had to worry about, like quicksand. The bloop sound that was recorded in the Pacific Ocean that baffled scientists was finally found to be an icequake. I have a silly and weird feeling of sadness knowing this is no longer a mystery. It's been one for so long. Next you'll tell me the wow signal was just space dust. It was a spacequake. That was just a beam of the tower collapsing. No biggie. For those confused. There was one, maybe not that widely known, about a guy who was found to have committed suicide in a motel in Washington or Oregon. No idea who it was. Strange note crumpled in the garbage that just said suicide. No one ever came forward to say they knew him based on his picture in papers. Was on all the unknown person forums. Even here on Reddit. Just one of those cases that was interesting to me. And, after many years, they used the DNA family matching thing and found his family. His family just thought he just went off and was living his life. No idea who it was. Strange note crumpled in the garbage that just said suicide. Okay, you gotta admit that's the most suspicious effing SH ever. How do we cover up this murder? Boss? I have an idea. Scribbles note. Boss, that's the dumbest idea ever. Just leave the body here. Fine. Tosses more in trash. That happened in Amanda Park, Washington. The alias he used to sign into the hotel was Lyle Stevick. His real name has not been released to the public, but he was 25 when he passed. I'm betting his name was Steve Lillick. Whether the Titanic sank in one piece or not. Many discounted those survivors who said they saw her split in two because they had a hard time believing such a mighty ship could rip apart like that. It wasn't until Ballard and his crew found her that the truth was revealed. And speaking of Ballard and the Titanic, the only reason he got financing to do the search, he had made several attempts before but logistics, schedules, and financing made each attempt fail, was the US Navy wanted him to search for 2 nuclear subs that had sank in the 60s. They agreed to secretly finance his search, and if he managed to find both subs, he could use the rest of the money and time to search for the Titanic. He found all 3 on the same expedition. Yup, the boats? The Scorpion and the Thresher, the only 2 nuclear-powered boats the Navy has lost. They couldn't find the Thresher? My understanding was that it got crushed on a test dive off of Cape Cod. Since it wasn't on an actual deployment, I figured they always knew where it was. Also, somehow there's a recording of the sounds inside the Thresher as it's being crushed and it's really creepy. The mysterious trails of rocks at Racetrack Playa in Death Valley National Park, California. For many years, the cause of these mysterious rock movements was unknown. However, in recent years, scientists have discovered that the rocks move due to a combination of wind and ice. During periods of rain or melting snow, water freezes into thin sheets of ice on the surface of the lake bed. When the ice breaks apart, it can be moved by wind, and as the ice sheets move, they push the rocks along with them, leaving behind the distinctive trails. The pioneers used to ride these babies for miles. And she's in great shape. This is the one I was hoping to see here. I was aware of the phenomena before it was explained, so seeing it solved was so satisfying. Elisa Lam, the woman found dead in the water tank on top of a hotel in Los Angeles. It wasn't a murder or ghost. She was mentally ill, having a bipolar episode. She decided to go off her medication and started to believe that she was being followed. Most likely she thought she would be safe in the tank, so she climbed in but couldn't get out and died of hypothermia. Definitely not ghosts or conspiracy, just unfortunate circumstances. They theorized that she was off her meds because they found slightly less than they would expect in her system. As someone who is bipolar, though, she didn't even need to be off her meds at all. I started Wellbutrin, which she was on too, at a low dose and had an absolutely horrible reaction. I started thinking I was being followed everywhere and eventually started being 100% convinced there were like horror movie levels of cut up dead bodies around every corner and that a serial K was following me and planning on doing the same to me. I literally couldn't move in my apartment because if I passed any doorway I was sure I was gonna see a dead body splayed out, but also desperately wanted to move because the K was 100% right behind me and I had to get away. Luckily I was aware enough that I could call my parents to help ground me a bit and call a friend to help me to the hospital. It started small though, so there was like a couple weeks of build up to this and I hadn't told anyone about any of it. So if I had just been slightly more delusional or had just a little less of a support group I could easily see myself having been the next Elisa Lam. I tried Wellbutrin too and tried to jump in front of a car. How to make gold from lead. Hundreds of years the alchemists tried it unsuccessfully. Today it is possible using a particle accelerator. However, it is far from cost-efficient. Mining gold is orders of magnitudes cheaper. All you gotta do is wait for a star to explode. Ships and planes never mysteriously vanished in the Bermuda Triangle. Sinks sank because of rough weather. And planes dropped because they hit airborne pockets of Maine and the engine stalled. Thanks to modern navigation, not a single ship or plane sank there in over 20 years. Just like quicksand. The Bermuda Triangle was one of those things I thought I'd have to worry about more in life as a kid. I remember being really concerned about the Bermuda Triangle and wondering why nobody was doing anything about it. Same. I was like getting books from my library about it and reading through them and getting more constantly. I thought it was the most important thing in the world and that its effects would be so much more prominent. The rediscoveries of lost cities such as the rediscovery of the location of Pompeii in 1748, the rediscovery of the location of Herculaneum in 1709, the discovery of the location of Machu Picchu in 1911. Troy kinda fits this too, with its very explosive discovery occurring in 1870. Troy was never really lost, though. Schliemann found it by going around to villages near the Scamander River and asking about ruined cities until someone told him, "Oh, yeah, there's a big one called Hisar Lake near Gokali." Then he dynamited everything until he found what he decided was Homeric Troy. The general consensus at the time was that Troy didn't exist and was a purely mythical city. That's about as lost as you can get. Just because some goat herders knew there were broken down walls in Turkey absolutely doesn't mean Troy wasn't lost. Torosaurus was actually a mature Triceratops. Nanotyrannus was a baby T-Rex. Stygimoloch and Dracorex are younger Pachycephalosaurus skeletons. Anatotitan was a grown-up Edmontosaurus and I think there was a few others just because baby dinosaurs looked drastically different than adults. I miss Brontosauruses. Brontosauri, named Lori, Shel Silverstein. Anyone? Good news. Brontosaurus is back on the menu. Yanapin synthetic DNA. The mature Brontosaurus is projected to function at an intelligence level equivalent to that of an elephant. Various business deals are under consideration for fully grown Brontos to be contracted out to independent mining outfits, mainly for work at open pit limestone and flintstone quarries. I scrolled far too long and didn't find anyone mentioning it, but the Zodiac cipher was finally cracked. From their YouTube video. The reason it took so long for people to crack it was because it was riddled with spelling errors indicating that the Zodiac K was probably undereducated or had a learning disability of some kind. Here is the YouTube link with a much more thorough explanation plus reasoning. After all these years, it's still fascinating to read about the Zodiac, specifically the hidden identity of this person. There's a strong chance they're dead now, but I hope we learn who it was. He could even be a senator from Texas. Ted Cruz would never have been satisfied with destroying the lives of only 5 innocent people. Kids love Cinnamon Toast Crunch because it's all sugar. It's literally the taste you can see. Why was it ever a mystery? The boy in the box has been identified as Joseph Augustus Sorelli, although his homicide is still an open investigation. Very likely the birth parents have nothing to do with it. BC it was an out-of-wedlock pregnancy. My assumption is exactly this. Since it was an out-of-wedlock pregnancy, the boy in the box was given away to hide the shame of having a baby out of wedlock. The siblings probably had no idea he even existed. Spontaneous generation. People used to think flies would spontaneously appear from rotten meat, as every time they had it, flies somehow would appear even though flies were nowhere close when the meat was okay. After observation and experiments, we understood flies landed in the meat, left their eggs, and then more flies would be born and then stay to eat the meat. I actually learnt how Louis Pasteur figured out it was false in science class a few years ago. First he set up 3 swan-necked beakers, and placed a small piece of meat in each. Then he poured water in one of them, so that the water stayed in the dip, but didn't touch the meat, so that nothing got in or out. He placed a bit of wool in the dip in another beaker, so that air can pass through, but not solids can, and he left another one empty. After a few days, Pasteur checked up on these again, and found maggots on the meat that was exposed to solids, and it was rotting as well. The meat only exposed to air was rotten, but no maggots, and the meat not exposed to anything wasn't infested, nor rotten, still wouldn't be fresh though. Pasteur was able to prove that spontaneous generation was indeed false. Yeah, I learned it in high school biology, and it was wild that it took a whole experiment to prove that. And how there were other examples like frogs spontaneously being created from lake water and things like that. It's how we got the salamanders equals fire myth too. They like hiding in logs. They crawl out when we put those logs on a fire. Just last year the identity of the Somerton Man was discovered. The Somerton Man was an unidentified man whose body was found on December 1, 1948 on the beach at Somerton Park, a suburb of Adelaide, South Australia. The case is also known after the Persian phrase tamam shud, Persian. Note 1 meaning is over or is finished, which was printed on a scrap of paper found months later in the fob pocket of the man's trousers. The scrap had been torn from the final page of a copy of Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, authored by 12th century poet Omar Khayyam. Wikipedia. Just a guy who split from his wife and didn't want to be found. There were so many spy theories about him too. Reality is somehow so much more boring than speculation. Makes me wonder if the case of the Isdal woman is just as mundane. Not a worldwide mystery but a mystery amongst my mom's side of the family. When my mom was little, like 813 years old, she was so close, until now, with her cousins that they all played together almost every day in their grandma's house, and that house is a second-story house. So here's how the mystery started. My mom, her siblings, and her male cousins played with a ball, and the ball went upstairs and into the only room that the stairs went to. But then the door suddenly went open and the ball bounced down the stairs. There was a moment of silence, and then they all ran to their grandma saying that there's a ghost. So their grandma comforted them and told the maid to check on it. And then she found no one there. A few weeks after that incident, they never went up to that room, and then they started to forget about it. Many years later, 2 months ago, my whole family went to my mom's hometown and she spent time with her brothers and female cousin of hers to go to the cemetery to visit grandpa. As we were going, my mom remembered that story and started talking about it. Then my mom said we never really knew who threw the ball back, and then her cousin said that was me. So my mom, her brothers and her cousin all laughed because the mystery was finally solved. Sadly, her cousin passed away 2 months ago. She revealed the mystery before she died of breast cancer. May she rest in peace. Thank God she revealed before passing away. Imagine if she confessed everything after passing away. It really was a ghost. Eventually, the Roanoke colony wasn't murdered by natives or kidnapped by aliens. They joined the local native tribe. We can tell because people in the tribe were born with blonde hair and blue eyes for decades after the colonials went missing. This is one of the few historical mysteries where the real solution has turned out to be as much if not more fascinating than the fanciful speculations. Comparative DNA analysis and population genetics research, both on human remains and living people, have revealed unexpected little pockets of genetic signatures quite far from where such genetic signatures are common. Small stranded groups of travelers or migrants going native somewhere very far from their homeland has almost certainly been a thing since the early days of human migration. The Zuni people of the American Southwest, for example, show some cultural and genetic evidence of having absorbed a shipwrecked boatload of Japanese people sometime in antiquity. For example, show some cultural and genetic evidence of having absorbed a shipwrecked boatload of Japanese people sometime in antiquity. Very cool. It's also not true. A man in Florida fooled people for years into believing there was a giant penguin walking the beaches. The hoax began in 1958 and was only revealed to be a hoax in 1988. Yes, I knew him. I didn't know he was the Clearwater Monster until I read his obituary. He was a fun guy to talk to. Most dinosaurs would likely have made some variation of a honk bark. Jurassic Park got it close with the sound of their raptors. Also, the Moai heads have bodies, and they just look like normal guys. I personally hope that some of the smaller dinosaurs made the signature beeping noise like finches make. Like the Roadrunner. Unless the little dinosaurs had lips, in which case they'd sound like Beaker from the Muppets. The Miraculous Staircase in the Loreto Chapel in Santa Fe, New Mexico. There was even a movie made about it starring Barbara Hershey. One of the myths is that it stands miraculously without a center support pole, and no engineer can figure out how that's possible. The center stringer is tightly wrapped with only 8 inches diameter. It acts as the center pole, Nuns set a 9-day novena for a much-needed staircase. A woodworker miraculously showed up from nowhere and built the staircase. It must have been Saint Joseph. The staircase was ordered from France. The manufacturer sent a guy to put it together. It's made of wood found nowhere in the area. It's a miracle. Because the wood is from France. Duh. And finally the guy who built it stayed in Santa Fe afterward. The local newspaper had his obituary, 1896 or 1898, and even said he was the man who built the staircase. That part was impossible to believe. If we can send people to the moon, then we can figure out how a staircase is supported. That stranded cosmonaut recording is 99% likely to be a hoax. Many have discredited if the brothers' technology was even capable of picking up the signal of a cosmonaut who's drifted off course. But the real smoking gun is that the woman in the audio recording is speaking in broken Russian, and the two brothers who picked up the signal had a sister who was currently learning Russian, which would explain the limited vocabulary and pronunciation issues that skeptics have pointed out. That's new. What's that one? The myth is that before Yuri Gagarin, the USSR tried to launch several humans, but due to technical failures the cosmonauts died on orbit or drifted away into deep space. The USSR supposedly covered these up, and Yuri was just the first time they managed to get someone back alive. It originates from several recordings some Italian guys made. It is, of course, ridiculous. Orbital mechanics does not allow a spacecraft to just drift away into deep space. Where is it gonna get the 3.2 kms of DV to reach escape velocity? And Yuri's trip was broadcast to the world as it was happening, with people all over the world picking up his signals. A spacecraft isn't exactly a subtle and easily missed object. Much less a spacecraft being subtly missed during the height of the Cold War. Lol. How caterpillars become butterflies. When I was 12 I wanted to go university to be the first person to discover how they do it. Once caterpillars have a cocoon, they secrete an enzyme that turns them into a puddle of stem cell filled goop, and then that becomes a butterfly. WTF. So they essentially K themselves and a new thing is born from their gore? Even weirder, they don't make a cocoon to wrap up in. The casing they're in is literally their skin. Imagine you're a bug and you shed your skin periodically so you can grow larger. One day you shed it, but all that's left underneath is a limbless, blind sack. You cannot move, cannot scream. Your internal organs melt inside of you and reform into a completely different shape. You burst from your old skin as an unfamiliar creature. The luminiferous ether. It was thought to be the medium through which light would travel. Since light could behave like a wave, and waves needed a medium, it was assumed there needed to be a medium for light that was both transparent, because we couldn't see it, and infinitely rigid, because the stiffness of the medium corresponds to wave speed. Turns out, light is an electromagnetic wave that can travel through a vacuum. Coincidentally, I learned today that's what Ethernet was named after when Xerox invented it in the 1970s. Jesus, the amount of stuff that Park invented that other companies turned into multi-billion-dollar empires is mind-blowing. Apple, MS, Cisco, Sun Microsystems, etc. And Xerox still just makes copiers. The two ships of the lost Franklin expedition of 1845 were both found in the last decade, sunk in the Northwest Passage, northern Canada. The mystery of what happened to the crew, 126 men I think, has been speculated upon with plenty of solid theories, but very few remains have been found. The ships are still being examined and may contain more clues. The Tist was originally a B ship. During the War of 1812, the Tist launched BS at Fort McHenry. School children sing about the event, and the rocket's red glare, the BS bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. The Tist is a pretty good show too. It's not exactly true to anything, but it's good. I actually love historic fiction that throws in its own silly fun. To a certain extent, like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, but more in the vein of the Tist, where we don't know what happened. So it's historical up to a point, then goes its own direction. Stendeck plane crash. Late 1940s, a British plane flying in South America sent out the message in Morse code 3 times. Stendeck then vanished. Found in the 90s to have crashed underpowered into the side of a mountain and buried in a glacier. It was a huge UFO conspiracy theory for years. And the mysterious message was most likely a generic message for the airport they were headed to, only mistranscribed at the time. Good analysis here. The Solway Firth spaceman became popular in ufology as it supposedly showed a mysterious figure in the background. For 50 years no one quite knew what it really was till someone analyzed the photo and concluded it was actually the mother who accidentally walked into the photo. But the reason she looked like a spaceman was because of overexposure. What's most interesting about this was that it was super obvious when you saw all the other photos taken that day. I think there's one literally a few seconds before or after the spaceman pic with the mother standing in almost the same spot. Where did you find these photos? I'm really curious but couldn't find anything using Google. It went from being a mystery to a banger of a Slipknot song.